Okay, looks like we are now live, and I'm just going to check and make sure that all of our sound and everything is coming off okay on our stream as it comes up here. There we go. All right, good. Are we? Yep, good. Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome to my live stream. This is a little bonus. I reached out to Tony Ortega, who is an amazing person in the history and journalism and tracking of the Scientology, the church Scientology. Obviously, you guys connected up with this video know who I am and he is, and we're not going to have to get into big, long introductions about all this. Tony, welcome to my channel. It's been a long time. I'm so happy to talk to you today.
Thank you for having me on, Chris.
Yeah, this is gonna be fun. Okay, so we're gonna get to it, and now I'm of course not seeing the comments come up on the side like I wanted, but whatever, no big deal.
Well, work on it, get it fixed, get it how you want it.
I'd have to get up and get out of here, and the most important thing about this is our conversation, so I'll just leave it.
Okay.
Danny Masterson, holy cow, what a month, huh? Now you've been basically kind of in the courtroom every day on this thing from the day it started.
That's right. I was at the preliminary hearing last year, and then this time as the trial was nearing, the court put out a notice that reporters were going to have to apply for badges. And so I applied, and they also wanted to know if anybody wanted to be pool reporter for the first week jury selection, because when they're doing jury selection, there's so many potential jurors in the room, there's not room for reporters. So there's only one media person at a time. So I applied for both, just thinking, you should always apply for everything and get what they give you. And I got both. I got a gavel to gavel badge, but I also was selected. There were only two of us that applied for pool reporter. So during that first week, there were days when I was the only reporter in the room as they were trying to select jurors. So that was fun. And it was while I was doing that I had to take really, really detailed notes because it was for the other reporters. That's what a pool reporter does, right?
Oh, okay,
so,
right.
Yeah. And so I had mentioned at my Substack, oh, by the way, you might want to see my notes that I gave to the other reporters. And the readers loved it. And then I realized, okay, that could be my niche, because I'm sitting there with all these great reporters from, publications, big publications. What could I do that they weren't going to do? And so then basically I did that. I just started typing every single thing I could that people were saying in the courtroom, and then dashing out at the breaks to just immediately send it to everybody. And that, there was no cameras. So this was like the second best thing, where my notes were about as close as you could get to being in that courtroom. So that was the little niche I was able to carve out for myself.
Yeah, and it's been a great one because you've been in a position where you can, I feel like a lot of this case has been, I'm right there, because I'm reading your line by line breakdown of, it's the best thing we have short of the actual court reporter's transcript of how this thing has been going.
Well, I'm not the court reporter. I don't get every word, but I do my best as it's going to like truncate things. So like, for example, the DA might say, well, now you said that in 2004 you were living here, and then later that year, did you move? And I would just make it in 2005, did you move? You know what I mean? I don't need all that extra verbiage. And that way I can get it a good sense of everything said, even if I don't get every single word. So that worked out pretty well. The toughest day was closing arguments, because with testimony, when they're asking a question and the person is answering, there's usually some pauses in there where I can catch up. But with closing arguments, Chris, I thought my fingers were going to fall off. It was just crazy.
I'll bet. Because they were going on a mad rate, and they were kind of long. There was a lot too there.
They took very few breaks. They were going long. They didn't, they didn't speak too fast because they want to be understood. But it was just hard to get everything down. But I think there was some testimony read back to the jury at one point, and so I got a chance to test what the court reporter had typed versus what I had, and I was pretty pleased with the result. It was pretty close.
Yeah, Yeah, it's definitely given us the impressions, but then for me following, and I'm sure for a lot of people also, your end of day videos are also were incredibly helpful because it's not enough to just see the words on the page. Sometimes you're missing the context or the expressions or the ideas, around it that give it more, oh, this is what they're talking about. Or when you would fill in the blanks on, here's who this person is and here's why that's important. That also was crucial for me to understand and track with what was happening.
Well, this was a complex case, and there were some complex points being made, and I knew that people might get a little confused from my notes. And so I just thought that made sense. At the end of the day, I'll go outside the courtroom, outside the courthouse. There's a little park on the south side of the building, and just they have some like metal chairs for the public to use. And just grab a chair, sit down, and just talk into my phone. Of course, I feel like an idiot, but it works. It works really well, and people all staring at me and stuff. But after the first couple, I realized it was people really dug it, and so that was something that. And some days I really took careful notes about all the things I was going to say. Other times I just kind of winged it. But that was fun, and I really appreciated how people really seemed to enjoy that.
Yeah, big time, big time. It's definitely familiarized me with Substack and with your new medium and platform and stuff. It's been great. I have so many questions. First off, I guess I'll start broad and maybe then we can drill down in any details that come up as we go here. I mean, the big question, of course, in everybody's mind right now, the thing's deadlocked. Oh my God, are they going to come back? Are they going to resolve this? Nail biting. People are, I mean, there's a lot of people invested in this thing, and who want that justice for those victims.
Well, let me describe the situation because deadlock is a little bit misleading, and the judge herself didn't use that word. So,
okay.
I know I did in my headline. A lot of reporters did, and in hindsight, I kind of wish I'd said it slightly different because what Judge Olmedo said on Friday, after only 2.5 days of deliberation, was that the jury was unable to come up with verdicts on all 3 counts. Now, that's the thing I think shocked everybody in the room.
Yeah.
Because talking to the other journalists, based on some of the things the jury was asking questions about, we kind of got the feeling that maybe they had settled on a couple of them, but they were split on a third. So when she told us that they couldn't come up with a verdict on any 3, wow, we were surprised. But she pointed out it's only been 2.5 days. The real problem here is that's holiday week is in the way. Normally what they would do is just come back Monday, keep at it, and keep working towards getting a unanimous verdict. But because of the Thanksgiving week, she has sent everybody home and they'll return on the 28th. Now, based on what Judge Olmedo said, I think she believes this jury can still do its work and reach a verdict. She does not think they're deadlocked in the sense that, that they're not going to be able to get there. So, and we were looking at some other cases for example, the Ghislaine Maxwell case also had about a month of testimony, and that took 5 days of deliberations before they returned a guilty verdict. So maybe it's just a matter of these people needed to get back in the room after the holiday, talk things over, and maybe they'll be able to reach something. Now, if that's not the case, the next step they would take, if they're still struggling to reach verdicts, is they would bring the jury out and allow the attorneys to ask a few questions to see if they can clear up any information that would help. Then send them back again, keep pushing them, come up. And then ultimately what we all, are dreading is that if they just can't come up with the verdicts, the judge would then declare a deadlock and declare a mistrial.
Right.
But then it would be up to the prosecutor whether or not to refile and have another trial. So, I'm sure that Danny's side is relieved that things are hung up right now. But chances are, if it ends in a deadlock like that, we're all going to be back in the spring, and these poor women will have to do the whole thing all over again.
Right. Is that your sense of where you think the prosecution might go? Of course, that depends on what the numbers are on the.
So right now we have no idea what the split is. We don't know if it's 6-6, if it's 11-1 for conviction or 11-1 for acquittal. We have no idea. But once it gets closer to declaring a deadlock, then that will be revealed. And then that may affect the prosecutor's decision on whether or not to refile. But again, I think it's early. I think there is a chance that this jury will be able to reach some verdicts on the 28th and a couple of days after that. So that's what I'm coming back for.
Okay, cool. I'm wondering. Sorry, let me just turn my phone down. I'm wondering about. Some of our minds immediately go to, oh my God, deadlock jury, Scientology influence. Now, I'm bringing it up not because I think that that's a probability, because I don't. But I do, you've been reporting on Scientology for years. You know all the dirty tricks. Do you think there's a possibility that could happen?
Yeah, I think it's pretty remote. I was there that first week, like I said, for jury selection, and I saw Judge Olmedo speak to each and every individual juror and saw them talk about what they knew about Scientology, which was mostly nothing.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty remote that Scientology would have somehow, because it's very random how they were chosen to come into the room and everything. It would just be really difficult. But the other thing I want to point out is it's not that surprising that they're not coming to a verdict just yet, because sexual assault is a tough one to get guilty on anyway. And you've got this time that's passed since the incident. I don't think it's really that surprising that you have some number of jurors that are having a bit of a problem with things so far. But that, again, they at one point they asked for the defense chart, which described levels of guilt, like somewhat guilty, mostly guilty, very guilty, and then beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
Which the defense always wants the jury to think that the idea of beyond a reasonable doubt is this impossibly high standard. So they create a chart like that. But if they wanted to see that, that tells me that you've got several people that all kind of feel Danny's guilty, but is he guilty enough? So maybe that's the discussion going on, but we just don't know yet. And once things come back the next week, we might get a better idea.
Right. You being in the room and there being no cameras in there, even some of the names of these women, Jane Doe 1, 2, 3, right? We don't even know who they are. How, we only have, the reporting as to how credible did they come across? How sympathetic did they come across? Because so much of these cases rely on the he said, she said. It really comes down to two people in a room and one person has one version of this and another person goes, no, I didn't do that. And it's, and it's like, well, now I got to figure this out. And there's very little other evidence around that. How strong do you see the case for the prosecution in this beyond he said, she said, and they have to make up their minds who they're believing?
Well, I did see these same three women testify a year ago at the preliminary hearing. And I think that was a good experience for them. I think all three of them did even better this time. They were compelling. They were emotional. And it seemed very genuine. And it was brutal. I mean, these are brutal. This is not, these are horrific charges that Danny Masterson is facing. And I can tell you, I don't want to go overboard with observing the jury because people always do. Right. I will just say that whenever I would look over when the women were testifying, the jury was fully paying attention to them. So, and that's what you want, right?
Yep.
And then they had, as far as corroborating evidence, they basically had people that they had told, years ago before they ever met each other. And that's one of the things the prosecution has been trying to battle is a strategy the defense had early on, which is that, this was all a plot dreamed up by Leah Remini to take down the Church of Scientology, and that these women met and colluded and stuff. So the prosecution made sure to put on friends, relatives of these women who years and years ago heard them talk about these things years before any of these women knew about each other. So they were, trying to combat that. And look, I think they were compelling. I think the evidence was strong. And then just maybe one sign of that is that on cross-examination, and I'm not going by my own perception on this, I checked with the other journalists a lot, and they all wondered about Cohen's cross-examination. It seemed so, I don't know, like such minor inconsistencies. I'll give you an example. There was also a Jane Doe 4. Now, her allegations are not part of his charges, but they brought her into, say another person, similar situation. And she had said that she had gone to Danny's house with a group of people and she had had 3 glasses of wine. And then Cohen was saying, well, didn't you tell Detective Vargas in 2017 that you had 5 glasses? So it's like, okay, did she have 3 or did she have 5? I'm not sure that either one of them would excuse what Danny's accused of doing to her. But you can see that that's how he was kind of picking at it to try to create doubt in the jurors' minds that their story has changed over time. That's his job. That's what he's got to do. That's the defense in this kind of case.
Right.
On any kind of sex assault case.
Right.
But a lot of times it just felt like a Jane Doe 2, he asked her, well, didn't you refer to this as our case? And she said, no, I called it the case. Didn't you say our? And I'm just like, who cares whether this guy is accused of raping 3 different people. You're not going to call it our case. So stuff like that, it just kind of felt like he didn't have much and he was picking around the edges. What he wasn't doing was challenging that these incidents had happened. You know what I'm saying? So, at the very end, he kind of suggested that Jane Doe 1's event maybe didn't happen at all. But that just isn't supported by the evidence, even, Scientology documents and stuff. So, I don't think there's any doubt, there shouldn't be any doubt in the jury's mind that these 4 women went through these events. And the question is how they perceived it versus how Masterson might have perceived it.
Right. And it's a little hard, given the graphic, physical brutality that was described, to imagine that this was consensual or that this was normal or this was something that you would misinterpret in some way or reframe later as, this brutalizing thing when the way they describe it, it's awful. It was like,
well, yeah,
whoa.
Cohen in his closing tried to raise that issue and say that according to the law, if the defendant thought he had consent, even if he didn't, you have to acquit him. Okay. And so when Mueller could come back at the very end, he really hit that. He's like, Jane Doe 1, think about it. Pillow to the face, choked her, brandished a gun. Jane Doe 2 flipped her over on her hands and knees and was jackhammering her as she was screaming no. Jane Doe 3, there's just that party really kind of demolished what Cohen was saying. The idea that Danny thought he had consent, that was just crazy. But, listen, Cohen has done a good enough job with these cross-examinations that this jury's been unable to reach a verdict. So I'm sure they're pretty thrilled at this point that it's at this stage.
Right. What are your ideas or thoughts, or what was the general sort of consensus about this, 10-day long break in the middle of this thing, in the middle of, probably heated or certainly interested deliberations, that now they're going to go off? I'm wondering, when we read judge admonishes the jury to not read anything, like how strongly is she wording this to them? And do you think they're really not going to look at anything? We've been talking about this nonstop for the last month.
She admonished them multiple times every single day. She made it very clear, when you go home, don't talk about the case. Don't read anything about the case. Don't do any research on the internet. Don't watch anything on television. Don't read anything in the newspaper. She was very, very clear, and it's just a matter of, are they going to stick to it or not? And I think Judge Olmedo prefers to trust them. I think Judge Olmedo believes in the jury system, and she's going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they're going to avoid all that this week, come back on Monday the 28th and start from scratch again and see if they can't come to a verdict. So I got the distinct impression Friday that she has not given up on this jury, and they may still be able to reach a verdict one way or the other.
Right. It definitely comes across that Judge Olmedo is knowledgeable, is very interested in what the law says and applying it, and that she definitely does seem to have an awful lot of faith and trust in this jury and their ability to to see what's going on and come to a conclusion on it. I like that.
And
I appreciate that with her.
and she gave us breakfast burritos on Friday.
Right. And
Now, and I'll give you a little scoop, Chris. I haven't written anything about this, but I had heard from some of my sources that out in the hallway, the Masterson side was really grumbling about that, and even talking about making something of it. That she's been so friendly. I mean, what happens is we're sitting there back there all day, and we're not idle. I mean, everybody's working on something. Like most people are doing what's called pre-writing. In other words, we're writing our story as if it has happened, so then we can just plug in the stuff when it does. So, the journalist next to me, he's really conscientious, much more than I am. He'd written a story if Danny was convicted. He'd written a story if he'd been convicted on only, one or two of the counts and what happens then. He wrote a story on if he was acquitted. And he had written a story about a deadlocked jury. So he was ready to go. He had everything ready to go. So that's what we're doing. We're sitting there chatting, but we're sitting there all day. And so she came out a few times, and she had put some Halloween candy out there. And she enjoys chatting with us, just chit chat. She would never go near anything involving the case in a million years. Right. It's just, these are people in her courtroom, and she's being nice to them. That's all. But it got back to me that the Mastersons apparently were really unhappy about that. So I don't know if they're going to try to make something out of that or not.
Interesting. I mean, I don't see how there's even anything to make. It's not like the same. It would not be it's not the same thing as if she went and gave them donuts. Or, went over to the prosecutor and was like, hey, here you go.
No, the Halloween candies are sitting right there on the little railing. Anybody can have them.
Right.
And I have seen the Mastersons taking them too. So, but the Mastersons have tried to make me an issue a few times. Cohen has tried to get testimony about me into the case at numerous junctures. And she just won't go there. She's like, the press is irrelevant. It's not part of this case. And I knew this is why, Chris, it's very tempting. Danny Masterson is, a few feet away from me, and Bijou is always turning around and giving me a smile lately. I don't know what that's about. And,
wow,
these other folks are just really close to me. It'd be very easy for me to go up and say, can I ask you what you're thinking? And I just have not, because I do not want to give them an excuse to try to get me kicked out of the room. Because that's the number one thing I need is access. I need to be in there seeing what's going on. So I've been very careful with that. And they have, of course, I did get called up to the sidebar once.
I was about to bring that up. Yeah. Like that must have been nerve wracking.
Oh my goodness. I mean, it's like something you would dream, you're dreaming of the courtroom, and then the judge looks at you and says, come up here. But there was this woman who came to the courtroom. She passed me a note identifying herself as somebody that was at the Substack. I didn't know who she was. And but then at the lunch break, she was sitting alone at the table, and I sat down with her to chat with her and say, oh, it's nice of you to come down and take a look at the case. And then that afternoon, the bailiff took her notes. I didn't see it. Somebody else one of the other reporters told me about it. And then at the end of the day, the judge cleared the jury and then said to everyone else, asked the woman her name, and then asked everyone in the audience, please leave. Ma'am, I want you to stay behind. Excuse me. So we're like, what's going on? And she came out later and said, oh, it was a misunderstanding, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And she had apparently been taking notes about the jurors or something, which you're totally entitled to do. If you're a member of the public, you can go into the courtroom, you can observe things, you can take notes. There's nothing wrong with it. Right. But for some reason, the bailiff didn't like it. And so then what happened that next day, I think that was a Friday. So the next Monday, I heard Karen Goldstein, the defense attorney, go up to the judge, wanted a sidebar. And we're like, okay, whatever, who knows? And so Philip Cohen, Karen Goldstein, Ariel Anson, and Reinhold Mueller, the four attorneys, are up with the judge. And then they just sort of part, and the judge looks at me and said, Mr. Ortega, could you come up here, please? I was like, oh my God. And all the reporters are staring at me like, what's going on? And she apparently the defense was trying to make something of that. I think the defense wanted to try to find a way to kick me out.
Right.
And so they had asked me if that woman had sent any notes to me by email or something. And I was like, no, I didn't hear from her. So that was it. But I think they were just trying to find a way to get me out of there. But it didn't work. So oh well.
Right.
But I had
Right.
my little moment up at the bench. That was fun.
Right. How interesting. Yeah, somebody also asked, and I want to confirm this with you, because I think I know, but why no cameras in the courtroom?
Well, because they're Jane Does,
Yeah.
because they're not identified, and even if you try to keep the cameras at a certain angle, they can be caught in the view. And so I think the combination of the nature of the crimes and then the fact that they're not identified was why Judge Olmedo decided 2 years ago, no cameras for anything. I mean, all the hearings they've had for the last 2 years, the preliminary hearing, no cameras whatsoever. She's been very consistent about that. So that's how I kind of knew I had a little advantage because, people still want to know what's going on in there. And so by creating this sort of transcript of what's going on, I at least give people the feeling of what it's like.
Yeah, exactly. You really do too. It's really been like a front row seat or a back row seat, but it's been a seat in the room for sure. Um, what are your thoughts? Okay, I have been, sharing my opinions, pontificating even, on my channel here about my views about Scientology and Scientology's influence and what it, means for this case. But you're right there. How much do you see it in the room? How much do you think the jury is like thinking, oh, Scientology, knowledge reports, ethics systems, masters at arms. You're in a lot of fucking, you're so fucked now, Julian Schwartz, right? A guy I knew, and worked with. I mean, I know that guy. So I felt kind of close to this, even though I'm not connected with it at all, because of that. So what's the sense of that?
Well, that's of course, well, that's why so many reporters are in there is they want to hear about the Scientology stuff.
Yeah.
And at the preliminary hearing a year ago, the judge decided that she was going to allow a certain amount in. And actually, I've reported about how I really believe Miscavige was giving Tom Mesereau orders back then.
Mm-hmm.
Danny's previous defense attorney was Tom Mesereau, the famous defense attorney who defended Michael Jackson and Robert Blake and Bill Cosby.
Mm-hmm.
And they made what in hindsight looks like a big blunder at the preliminary hearing where they tried to use the ethics book to get a Jane Doe 3, to say that there's nothing in there about not turning in people to police. And it turned out she was asking him to look through a chapter where that's not in there. Then the next day, D.A. Mueller asked to borrow Mesereau's copy of the ethics book, turned to a different chapter, and showed it's definitely in there in the high crimes and suppressive acts stuff about you're not supposed to turn in a fellow Scientologist to civil authorities. So that was a huge blunder, it seemed like to me. And there was just no question. Mesereau's good. He's smart. I don't think he would have done that unless Miscavige was asking him to do it.
Yeah.
So now that they've got this new attorney, even before the trial, Chris, he was making noise about how he was not going to do the same thing. He's not going to bring in the same approach. And he tried to get Scientology eliminated altogether. But not only is the DA arguing, I have to have Scientology to explain why these women did what they did, but also the judge always says, well, the defense brought it in first. So that blunder by Mesereau has turned out to be so big in this case. So they have had quite a bit of Scientology. It's kind of come in interesting ways. And I don't know that all of it was something the jury understood, but it's pretty clear that these women were indoctrinated Scientologists who were told that, if you were a victim, you caused it yourself, you pulled it in. And that, we don't use the word rape here. Basically, they were told that you're just not going to turn to Danny Masterson for this. He's protected. Yep. He's an ethical upstat. All this stuff came in. And now, how that translated to what they feel about the case, we don't know yet. But I know some people are frustrated that there wasn't even more Scientology. I know, for example, that there are documents about knowledge reports and stuff that I want to see. That they sec checked Danny Masterson, right? There were knowledge reports written about Danny and by Danny.
Yep.
I mean, all that stuff should come in, but it's more about how Scientology handled it than about what Danny did.
Right.
So I think the DA and the judge have been trying to bring in enough to help the jury understand why a woman would be terrified for years of saying anything. That's the important thing.
Yeah.
And not so much about the inner workings of Scientology. Now, we hope some of that stuff comes out in the civil trial. They're also suing Scientology civilly for harassing them. Maybe some of that will come out in that case.
Yeah. I'm counting on it. I mean, I know the rules of evidence and the rules of procedure and everything are different in a civil case and a bit broader. And I am really hoping that that allows, you know, us to, our side to,
well, the public, I mean, the public deserves to hear this stuff,
yeah,
you know?
they do. They do, because
however you feel about it. Yeah.
I used to live this stuff. I mean, again, when you're reporting on this has just been like, Jesus Christ, I'm like right back in the headspace of, you know, this is all okay and you're out exchange and you owe him for this and he's the upstat in this. And it's been so crystal clear going back over the ethics book myself and in doing shows about it, how it's not an exaggeration to say that these are mafia cultural tactics. This is how the mafia works. You're protected. You're a made man. You're the person that nobody can touch. And we're going to do, and the entire force of this is going to come to protect you if you are in trouble. And that's the position Masterson is in, is he's this protected guy.
Well, Chris, I know you would appreciate it. One of the things that's been so bizarre during this whole process is again and again, every former Scientologist that's got up there has said, yeah, we were told you're not supposed to turn in a fellow Scientologist. Yeah. It's in the ethics book. It's in the ethics book. And of course, then it came in the preliminary hearing. And every day, these reporters go to the Church of Scientology for a comment. And every day, Karen Powell says, we don't have a rule like that. We tell people to turn people in. And you're just like, it's right there in the book. And I hope that's one of the results of this is I hope people see how blatantly Scientology lies about itself. Yes. I mean, I think most people know that, but it was never on display as much as it has been the last 5 weeks. Just incredible.
Big time. Big time. I have an idea that I have been talking about here, and I wanted to get your take on it, about Masterson and his relative importance in Scientology, because the fact of the matter is that, you know, up until this whole thing blew up, Masterson was a second-rate Scientologist, really hardly there at all. He'd come up for the Christmas stories things at Celebrity Center, you know, when they would do these little charity play things. Otherwise, his commentary in public media has been at most read a book, and that's about it, you know, at least as far as my exposure to him goes. So he's not a Tom Cruise. He's not a John Travolta. He ain't out there doing that.
He was, though, a reliable little warrior. I remember when Going Clear was premiering at the Sundance Film Festival in Utah, and some of us that were in the film got to go to that. We flew out there, and right that weekend, Danny Masterson had an interview in, I think it was Paper Magazine, where he was just using curse words and stuff.
I remember that,
defending Scientology. So he would turn on the sort of attack dog persona when Scientology needed it. And the other thing he would do is he would show up for the front groups and raise money and stuff like that. He seems to me like more of a cultural Scientologist. You're right. He's not clear. But he's part of the Scientology clan. And then so the question in this, maybe you could help me understand this better, because from the beginning, people were always telling me, from the day I first broke the story of the investigation in 2017, people were saying, oh, they're going to throw him under the bus. Mm-hmm. Miscavige is going to dump him. And they never have. They even had an attorney, a Scientology attorney, try to intervene in the criminal case last year. It was amazing because they didn't like something the judge had said about Scientology. Mm-hmm. So they're really sticking by this guy. And people always ask me why. And I'm not 100% sure, because I've been told that if he is convicted, they are definitely going to have to cut off contact with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess then the question is, he and his family are super, super tight. They're proving that in court every day.
Yep.
Is Scientology worried that if they lose Danny, they're going to lose this entire clan of celebrities? I don't know. What do you think?
That's my thesis. That's exactly my conjecture, is that it's the network he's connected to, because Danny Masterson is, as far as I know, all the way to today, is close personal friends with Ashton Kutcher, with
Right?
with an array of celebrities. I mean, this whole network that comes out from him, if you put him in the middle and look at all these connections. And by the way, Scientology is all about connections. They have custom-made software in the Church of Scientology's justice framework to lay out and map a person's connections.
Right.
I've seen
right.
it. So
Yeah.
they're very big on networks of connections. And when you look at somebody like Masterson, he's not only second-gen Scientologist. So you have his parents who are in, but all of his siblings, step-siblings, half-siblings. And they're actors. They're celebrities themselves. They're in there bringing in the big bucks, or at least some bucks, and influence. Yeah. So I think that's a tremendously important part of this. Is Danny Masterson doesn't live in a vacuum. He is core to this entire family. And then you've got Billy Baldwin, China Phillips, all these other, Mackenzie Phillips, this whole clan. This is old money. This is money that's been around for a while. This is influence that's been around for a while. So I think if they preemptively throw him under the bus, there's going to be an awful lot of very pissed off Scientologists and Scientology adjacent celebrities who are going to be like, well, that was not really warranted or called for. He's innocent.
Right.
And so I think they're waiting to the last second before.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things change depending on the verdict. But at this point, I mean, I was told that well before the trial that this family was super tight, and they will stick by Danny no matter what. And they've proved it. They're in the courtroom every day, and in fact, their group has gotten larger and larger. So now, the last couple of days, they not only took up the whole family section, but quite a few of the regular audience chairs. And I don't know them all. I know a lot of them, but yeah, it's been something seeing them kind of pack the courtroom.
Yeah, I'll bet. There's a lot of support there. And I obviously they want the jury to see that too.
Yeah, I thought about that right at the beginning, and I thought, I like this jury. They seem like normal folks, working class, middle class, a mix of ethnicities and ages. I don't know that they know who any of those celebrities are, and I don't know that they're starstruck at all. So, I mean, obviously they've been told that Danny is a TV actor, but they just seem like good, normal folks to me, and I understand why Judge Olmedo has not given up on them yet.
Yeah, makes sense. What are your thoughts in terms of oh, I just had it and then I lost it. Sorry about that. Let me get it back here.
Trying to think of a question for you in the meantime.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm having this total brain freeze right now. Because I was just thinking about Masterson and all of his connections and everything. And I guess, the case, Cohen's case. There was none. I mean, he was just, his entire case is taking apart the prosecution. What is up with that? That makes no sense to me.
That's very normal in cases like this, Chris.
Really?
And I've seen people say, why did Danny call no witnesses? Why didn't Danny put on a case? They did put on a case. Their case was tough cross-examination of every prosecution witness. And that's pretty normal for a case like this. Okay. When the trial started, the defense only listed 4 witnesses that they might call. One was his assistant, Bree Schaefer, and the other 3 were just experts. And at the end of 5 weeks, who wants to hear an expert talk about this nature of memory? So I think they were smart not to call those folks. Could they have called some other people that maybe were, in that scene to maybe vouch for Danny? I don't know. I understand why the defense did what it did. And obviously, I mean, they've gotten at least a partial result. They've kept this jury from coming to a verdict right away. So that was a case. And it is, I think, not uncommon for this sort of charges.
Okay. Okay. So nothing really unusual there. I would, what, quite honestly, what I was thinking is, Jesus, if I was in Danny's shoes, I'd be like, I want 20 people up here telling this jury how innocent I am. I want 50 people. I mean, I'd be like, fit to be tied that there was no real, that's all there is to the defense. I was just like, man, I don't know. Okay.
I think the problem he had with that was that if he called up some of the people that were there at that party with Jane Doe 1, for example,
Oh, sure.
they gave early statements to the LAPD 18 years ago, 19 years ago. And I have a feeling DA Mueller would have used that to just, really put them in a tough spot about, well, you're saying this today, but didn't you tell the LAPD this back then? And stuff that could be kind of easily disproved. So that was the sense I had, was that if Danny brought on any of these friends of his, there could be a big risk. Yeah. And then Danny himself didn't testify, and all the experts kept telling me he's not going to testify. In American style justice, it's very rare for a defendant to take the stand in a case like this. Yeah. And so that was expected that he wouldn't testify. I know I was hearing from some of my English readers that were like, why aren't we hearing from him? But that's just the way that we have a Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, which guarantee an absolute guarantee of remaining silent in court if you're a defendant. So that the jury is instructed not to consider that at all, not a sign of innocence or guilt that Danny did not take the stand.
Right. And it makes sense. I had a lawyer friend of mine on this channel as well talk about how that opens the door, if he did take the stand, to a lot more questioning that they don't want to go into. So right. he didn't want to go into that.
Yeah, he would have to go through a brutal cross-examination. Right. And I said this last week, that the week before they went to deliberations, when people were asking me about both sides kind of paring down their witness list, what that was about. And yes, so I guess Olmedo wanted them to hurry up, but I really felt at that point both sides thought they were winning. And so they were willing to kind of cut down their witness list. They both felt like things were going well for them. And so that's why they wanted to hurry up and get to the jury and see what they thought.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. Now, one of the most educational things for me, who is not really super familiar with law as it's really practiced versus Law and Order or SUV or whatever, the endless parade of legal shows that I've been watching since I was a kid, I've had this very Americanized entertainment view of the court system, and it has been a real education to get dragged through what it really looks like versus what they show you on TV, even to the point where the idea of witness monologuing, just cancel that. They don't want to hear it. It's answer the question, and if you say anything, don't say anything else. And you're just like, my God, there's so much more to say. Oh, please keep, and this kind of thing. How controlled the conversations and the environment are was something that, frankly, it was an education for me. It was a surprise. But it seems to also speak to why it is that it is so hard to get religion and Scientology into a courtroom, is because you watch this dance that these guys do around the very word being brought up, much less its procedures, and how every single time it comes up, the judge has to admonish, this is only for state of mind. This is not about whether it really happened or not. And I'm teeth gnashing because I'm going, of course it really happened. They're criminally culpable. And it's so frustrating, right? So do you have any comments on that? Because it's
you described it really well, Chris. You described it really well. And I would just say that as far as seeing how the case actually unfolded versus what we see on TV, I mean, you kind of expect that the actual court in real life is kind of tedious and boring. But I'll tell you what, it wasn't in this case. All the testimony was interesting. All the cross-examination was, really nervous time. I mean, really interesting all the way. But yeah, every time Scientology would come up, you'd wonder, okay, is Mueller going to get this one in or not? Mm-hmm. And there were some really interesting moments, like, for example, so Danny's facing charges for forcibly raping Jane Doe 1, 2, and 3. But they wanted to bring in Jane Doe 4 because she kind of sets up the whole thing that the arrest came after her. Now, Jane Doe 4 gave me permission to identify her. She's an actress named Trisha Vesey, who made some really cool independent films in the late 90s, early 2000s. She was really compelling on the stand. And she got in some really interesting things beyond what I think most people were expecting with Scientology. One of which was when she was describing the second incident and she came to consciousness and Danny was on top of her, raping her. And she was kind of freaking out about it. And this is not uncommon. We heard from the expert that if a woman feels like, well, this is happening, they'll at least say, put on a condom,
Yes.
To preserve their health. And her testimony was when she said that, Danny said, diseases are in the mind.
That's right.
So, and they didn't even have to say that was Scientology. I mean, I think everybody in the room knew that that's what Danny was talking about.
Yep.
So that was an interesting moment. And then I think the other person that brought in more Scientology than I was suspecting was Jane Doe 3, because she was in the relationship with Danny. And so she was able to describe a kind of whole arc of how their relationship went. And then she really described very well what it was like after the second incident happened with her, where it was this unconscious sodomy that left her injured. And she was really upset. She went to the church, and then she described what Miranda Scoggins, this ethics officer, said to her, and then her husband, who was the chaplain,
another guy I knew, by the way.
Some of the stuff they said was just crazy, but I'm sure it's familiar to you.
It was very it was impactful stuff. It's really, I got to tell you, I mean, just as an ex-member, I've been out a decade now. It's like listening to Martian, watching and listening to these people and thinking that one time in my life, I was saying and thinking and doing the same things. It's a little mind numbing sometimes. It's like, my God.
Jane Doe 3 did one thing that she did not do in the preliminary hearing. And it was what I felt was one of the more important things said during direct examination. And that was when she had that second incident where he had abused her, and she went to the church to turn him in. And they told her, well, you're in a relationship. You can't rape someone in a relationship. And that, don't use that word, et cetera, et cetera. The important thing was, and this wasn't clear to me before, she made it very clear this time. She said, I believed her. She was my ethics officer at the church. She accepted that idea. And I think that's really key to understanding what she went through later. And that was kind of missing, I think, a year ago at the preliminary hearing. Jane Doe 3 made it very clear. It's not just that this crazy Scientology stuff was out there and these crazy Scientologists were telling her this bullshit, but that she believed it was super true and that she needed to live by it.
Yes.
And it took years to get out from underneath that. That I thought was a really key thing in the trial.
Big time. There's so much you want to get across to the jury, and you have so few opportunities. I got to admit, I know it was stricken from the record, but I really laughed when DJ Donkey Punch came out in the trial.
Yeah.
Just cause.
And the thing was, Trisha got that in on cross, so they couldn't blame, because Cohen, the defense attorney, would call for a mistrial because DA Mueller had asked something that they didn't want him to ask. But this was Cohen asking on cross, didn't you go to an event that Danny Masterson hosted? This was some years after he had, these sexual assaults had occurred. And she said, yeah, I went with Christopher, his brother. He took me there, and Danny was DJing under the name Donkey Punch. And she somehow managed to say it twice, right? And Cohen's like looking at the judge, and the judge is saying, okay, we'll have that stricken. The thing was, Chris, it was said without context. So I don't know that the jury had any idea what that refers to, and they're not supposed to look it up. They're not supposed to research. But, I mean, that is one of those things that kind of drives you crazy, that between 1996 and 2004, he was allegedly this serial rapist who was, had kind of the same MO each time, gave him something to drink. They were suspiciously intoxicated, flipped him over, anally raped him. And then at the same time, he's performing under a name that's a slang reference to anal rape.
Yeah.
And you think, gosh, how can they not enter that? But it's one of those things that they say is more prejudicial than probative.
Right.
So, in other words, that you could have a DJ named DJ Donkey Punch who's not a rapist. It's not really evidence of anything.
Right.
But on its own, it's not. But of course, in the context of things, it sure seems like evidence that he was basically advertising his predilection.
Exactly. Exactly. And at the same time that this is happening, and this is the part that my mind even strains to understand as a former Scientologist, I mean, all the way in the headspace, is how he rationalized or justified all of that, because it's clear that he actually is a true believer to some degree.
Right. And the diseases are the mind thing,
yeah.
say that. And I think that my theory is that some of the younger celebrity Scientologists just don't feel a lot of pressure to go up the bridge.
Yep.
They don't have anything to prove, but they're still very much culturally Scientologists. They follow the code.
Yep.
They believe that it's true, and they will follow the policies, even if they're not spending a lot of money to move to clear, et cetera. So I think that's the case with him, where I was told that his mother had a quick excuse if somebody brought up around them that Danny's not even clear. His mother would tell people he was clear in a past life.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. You could completely get away with that. You absolutely could. Okay. Well, I think we're gonna move toward wrapping up, because I don't want to strain you any longer on this. I know you've got a lot of work to do and other things too, but this has been really good. Let me ask you one other thing, and this is totally out of left field, but I wanted to get your take on this, because we have seen Laura Prepon, okay, distantly connected with Masterson through the 70s show and through the social network of the Friends and that whole spider web I was referring to earlier. And she refuses to talk about Scientology other than to say, I'm no longer part of it. I guess that dropped a year ago or so in People or something. So
right.
Do you think there's a connection here? Because I kind of do.
A connection where?
That the social connection is such that she's not going to go blab and tell tales about Scientology or go on some, big thing about it, even though she's kind of drifted from the faith, you could say, and has even publicly admitted it.
Yeah, I have some
I don't know,
friends that kind of keep an eye on social media. They tell me she's still connected to some of these folks, and
yeah,
it makes you wonder, how far out is she really? Ben Foster, her husband, was into transcendental meditation. He's not a Scientology guy, and I think that made a difference. But it's interesting that in the last couple of years, of course, when Leah came out, she came out with guns blazing. Mm-hmm. But with people like Beck and Laura Prepon and Jason Lee, we're now starting to see some celebrities just sort of like move away, but make a statement. See, Chris, how other people leave and never say a thing.
Yep.
But what's interesting with Jason Lee, Beck, and Prepon is they not only had distant Scientology, but each of them said something to a reporter and then nobody else. They knew what they were doing. Exactly. They were basically putting down a marker to say, I'm out, don't mess with me, I'm not going to say anything else. So that allows them maybe to move in some similar circles with some of these Scientologists. But that's a big blow for Scientology to lose those people over several years. I remember when the Laura Prepon thing happened, and I was kind of like, I don't know, this feels more political than anything. And I called Mike Rinder, and Mike was like, this is huge. It makes Miscavige look so bad. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, that's true. I mean, even if she is not, doing the Leah Remini thing and speaking out, it's a disaster for Miscavige to keep losing celebrities like this.
That's right. That's right. Those are the only real reason we keep hearing about it. I mean, if we're going to get really real about why is Scientology in the media, it's because of Tom Cruise, John Travolta, these celebrities. I mean, they keep it there because people just won't stop being fascinated with the private lives of celebrities. And when you have the most powerful celebrity in the world, or one of the most, arguably, with Tom Cruise, who has been very vocal in the past about his support of this, then it just doesn't die. It just doesn't go away.
Tom Cruise is so valuable to them. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And people, I'm sure, were the same with you. They're always asking me, well, is he only staying because he's being blackmailed? And I say, no,
Mm-mm.
he really believes that L. Ron Hubbard is the greatest human being that ever lived.
That's
He
right.
really believes that David Miscavige is the greatest human being living today.
That's right.
And, he really believes that Scientology is the only thing that's going to save this prison planet. And once you buy it, Leah and I had a conversation about this the other day, and I was telling her that because she said something about they just keep trying and trying. I said, yeah, but they've bought into this idea that they can violate WOG law, they can violate it because they're saving the planet. They really think that.
That's right.
And once you buy into that idea, it's hard to shake it.
That's right. It's powerful stuff. I tell you, it's heady, powerful stuff.
Well, you were in the grips of it. I wasn't.
Yeah, I that's why I can say that. Yeah, it's when you because it's I mean we can get all the biochemistry of it, but the bottom line is it's empowering. It really makes you feel like you're not just some schmo. And celebrities have the exact same ego problems and depression and anxiety as everybody else.
Very good.
About their work. And so when Scientology comes along and ego boosts them to the stars, Tom, I had this thing one day where I was like, oh my God, I actually saw the world through Tom Cruise's eyes, and the Scientology experience he's had has been almost nothing but positive and reinforcing for him. Why would he ever walk away from that?
Yeah. I remember Tiziano Lulli once told me about an auditing session he had where he had, they do this past life auditing where supposedly you're remembering these things. So he remembered that he had been this like prison planet warden or conquering, military leader on some planet 10 million years ago. And he said that the point about, I know that sounds silly, he said, but the point is you come out of that and you feel like you're 10 feet tall.
That's right.
I mean, you look around you and these puny little humans, they don't get it. They don't understand. You used to run a planet. And he said it's an incredible rush. And that's what you're chasing all those years in Scientology. You want that rush that you feel when Scientology connects you up to this galaxy-wide narrative that you're a part of and that this current lifetime, and it's just meaningless,
Exactly.
So that's the drug they're selling is, convincing you that you're Luke Skywalker and that and the fact that everyone else doesn't realize it, that's okay because they're zombies. They're sleepwalking through life. And and of course it's all reinforced in the movies and stuff. But so yeah, I understand why these celebrities find it to be a really gripping drug. On the other hand, I always like to point out they really don't have that many of them.
That's right. That's right. Shrinking. Well, the number is shrinking every day too. I'm hoping Michael Pena wakes up. That would be nice because he seems like a nice guy.
Well, that's a tough one because his wife, Bree Schaefer, is a key part of this case.
Right. Oh, that's right. I forgot about that connection.
And what I found interesting was in 2017, I broke the story.
That's right.
That Danny was under investigation and that his assistant was this Bree Schaefer. She's named in the police reports. And then I had this bizarre story about I got some property records showing that right at the time they were forcing Jane Doe 1 to sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement with Danny. Danny moved 2 buildings worth more than $1 million each into Bree's name. And 9 months later, took them back. What the hell's that all about? Mm-hmm. That's why I was so, both sides said they were going to call Bree Schaefer. And I was like, good. Ask her about the property swaps. What's going on? But anyway, the point is, the story came out in 2017. I've been writing about them. In 2018, Hollywood movie star Michael Pena and his wife Bree moved to Clearwater.
Oh. Okay.
So I think they're concerned. I think they're very concerned about what this case could mean for them. Yeah. And then ultimately she wasn't called, but there's still the civil case.
Yeah.
That could be interesting.
That's right. Oh, and considering that Scientology is actually a defendant in that should be that should blow open so many doors to.
Right. And so let me just really quickly explain it for your
Yeah,
viewers
please.
that these the story had been broken in 2017 that Danny was under investigation, and then they were waiting and waiting for the LAPD and the DA. And by the middle of 2019, these women were frustrated. Nothing seemed to be happening. So in August 2019, they filed a lawsuit against Danny and the Church of Scientology over what they say have been years of harassment since they came forward. Poisoned pets, houses damaged, phones, broken into. They have this whole litany of things they allege that Scientology and Danny Masterson has done to them. Danny and the church both deny they have anything to do with it. That was filed in August 2019, but then the criminal charges were filed in June 2020. So the civil case has kind of taken a back seat to the criminal case. Now, the civil case did go through an interesting history where Scientology tried to get it kicked out with these arbitration motions.
Yeah.
It was temporarily, it was restored by an appeals court. Now it's on hold until December 13th. And Scientology has already said they plan to file an anti-slap motion at that point. So that's just going to be going on for years, I think.
Yeah.
And it's separate from the criminal case. But some really interesting things that did not come out in the criminal case might show up in the civil case, and that's something I'm interested in.
Big time. Me too. Me too. I'd like to see a lot more Scientology policy actually make it into the courtroom and how it's actually applied in the real world. That would be mind-blowing for a lot of people. They just don't have any idea. They think about it in the same way they think about the Catholic Church or the Christian Church, and it's not the same.
Well, and Leah made a really good point the other day. She said, whether it's a guilty, whether it's a acquittal, the point is Scientology has been exposed for the kind of mafia-like organization it is, and their daily ridiculous denials. I think people have to see how nuts they are. All the statements coming out from Karen Powell, just absolutely ridiculous. So hopefully the public has been educated a little bit.
We shall see. Okay. Well, Tony, thank you again for giving me this hour of your time and speaking to my audience here. This has been fascinating and fun. So thanks a lot.
You bet. And if I could just say, please sign up for free emails at tonyortega.substack.com. You will get all my reporting as soon as it comes out. And I'm doing videos and podcasts. And once things start up in court again, you won't have to look for it. It'll go right to your inbox. TonyOrtega.substack.com. Thank you, Chris.
Beautiful. You bet. All right, folks. I will see you again in a couple days. We're going to be doing a live Q&A right here and catching up on my backlog of questions that have been asked over the years. And then, of course, you will see the regular live show next Friday and usual content. So thanks for coming around and watching, and we'll see you guys later. Bye-bye. All right.